He was my pizza teacher back in the day.
In Italy, whenever you have pizza, you always pair it with beer.
Alessandro and I are each going to be suggesting 2 different beers.
Here in the US is definitely the one that you can easily find.
This is the perfect beer to pair with pizza.
Very simple pizza, has very few ingredients, so the dough needs to be a good dough.
I use buffalo mozzarella with my Margarita pizza.
Just those ingredients, they just make poetry.
Welcome back to Beer Brackets, everybody. Today is a very, very special episode. Alessandro, look what we have in front of us, man. You got a full pizza.
Look at this.
This is how delicious his pizza was. I made 2 pizzas. We ate all of it. All of it. Aside from one piece that I saved for the filming, because I'm just like, I need something. I need something to be able to show the good people.
That's fair, that's fair.
It was so good. And I got a special little something to tell you after about this too, how this just worked out. I did a pizza pilgrimage and I found the most delicious ingredient that was kind of like a new addition to my pizza. This is the first of its kind of these kinds of episodes. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking down, as the title says down below, the perfect beer pairings to go with pizza. Everybody talks about wine pairings. People talk about whiskey pairings. We want to talk about beer pairings.
Exactly. We're starting off strong here with a classic Italian pairing. Like, you couldn't be more classic than this.
There's actually a story behind why we decided to start with pizza, which I think you should grace our viewers with your wonderful storytelling skills and tell everybody why pizza and beer is a significant pairing.
Thank you, my friend. You're always so kind.
You're very welcome.
We were talking one time and both like making our own pizza, and
we do.
We were chit-chatting about traditions and things, and I realized that in Italy, whenever you have pizza, you always pair it with beer. There's
Isn't that amazing?
Almost no exception. Like, it's almost automatically.
No exception.
Yeah, it's one of those things that just goes with beer. But it's funny because, like, when I moved here to the US, traditionally people tend to ask you, like, oh, what's the best wine to go with your pizza?
Exactly.
Right? Which again, like, you can do, obviously. I'm sure there's people in Italy also that do that. At least where I grew up, and everybody I know, everybody everywhere I've been in Italy, pizza goes with beer. So we decided, you know what, let's talk about this hidden gem tradition that exists that all Italians know, but apparently, like, not everywhere else is known.
That's so fascinating to me because growing up in a city that had a lot of Italian restaurants, you would go to like a real Italian pizzeria and they would suggest a wine pairing. It was a whole wine list, and maybe they'd have 1 or 2 beers on tap, but it was an afterthought. It wasn't something that was a focus. So that was always so fascinating to me. So we decided in our first episode, where we're talking about food, what better thing to pair beers with than pizza? Alessandro and I are each going to be suggesting 2 different beers. If you've seen a lot of our episodes before, we're going to do the common theme of easy to find beers that you can most likely find near you if you dig around a little bit. So beer suggestions to pair well with pizza. And we both made a classic Margarita style pizza. We're going to open and close our pizza beer brackets. We're going to talk about why they're good pairings. And in between, we're going to give you guys some tips on how we went about making these pizzas as well. I can't wait for this, man.
Right?
This is so amazing.
Right?
So beer brackets.
Pizza and good conversation, friends, like, that's awesome.
So I see you've already got your beer out on the table. Before we start talking about pizza and enjoying our pizza, we got to open a beer. Why did you start by suggesting a Peroni with your opening pizza beer brackets?
Well, I kind of had to mention it because it is a classic beer in Italy as well. Like, it's not necessarily, depending on where you are, the one that might always be on tap. But here in the US is definitely the one that you can easily find that you know would be the closest resemblance to one that you can get easily in Italy as well. So I thought, like, well, let's feature that, like, because that's a good start. Everybody would probably be able to get their hands on and try it to see what they think.
There you go. My opening pizza beer bracket is Pilsner Urquell. My friend, I think this is the perfect beer to pair with pizza, the original Pilsner. I think it's just got such a strong bitterness, such a strong, unique, bitter character to it. And we did a whole review of Pilsner Urquell. I'll post a link to it down below if you haven't had a chance to check it out. But I think the bitterness of the Pilsner Urquell is just the perfect accompaniment to the cheese, the slightly salty cheese, the acidity of the tomato sauce, and, you know, the breadiness of the dough. I think it just cuts that bitterness from the Urquell, and they both just pair so well together. Let's pour these out and let's get eating.
Let's do it. We've been talking for too long. We haven't opened a beer yet. Like,
yeah, I know. We've been talking for way too long without a beer. Way too long without a beer. So while we're pouring out these beers, man, I got to ask you, So the good people at home are probably wondering. Now, we have our own ways of putting together these pizzas that are relatively simple. I actually learned from Alessandro. He was my pizza teacher back in the day. So I learned all my dough skills from Mr. Alessandro, and I picked up a couple of things as well on making tomato sauce. Why don't you give him a quick rundown of how you prepare? To start with, one of the most important things, the dough. How do you prepare your dough?
That's a very important question. But before, my friend, I think we should just say cheers and have a little sip here.
You're a wise man. You're a wise man, good sir. Cheers.
Cheers.
Happy opening pizza beer bracket. Oh, I love it, Urquell.
The dough, that's such an important part of pizza. It makes or breaks. Like it's in Italy, it's like, it all about the dough. Like it starts there. But
all about the dough.
One important thing is simplicity. Like Margarita is a very simple pizza, has very few ingredients. So the dough needs to be a good dough. I'm sure there's plenty of better chefs out there that can tell you, but...
Don't sell yourself short.
But
you're quite the chef.
I found like my way of making it work, start with a very simple ratio of like 1 cup of water and 3 cups of flour. This can be between 2 and 3, let's say, because it depends a little bit on the humidity and where you are. And that's where like the skill like comes into knowing when you put enough flour in to know that the dough is ready. But that's the basic ratio. Then where I am, I can only get like dry yeast.
Look at this pizza.
So I tend to use like a half tablespoon of that. I put it in the water first, and then add the flour. And then after you've added the flour, you go ahead and add the salt. If you add the salt with the yeast, like sometimes that creates like a little bit of a problem, so it doesn't get that nice rise right away. So that's usually how I start. How about you, my friend? What have you developed the method in?
It's very similar in what I do. I use double loaf flour. I'll put all the measurements up on the screen here, but mix that flour in. What I do is add a little bit of water. Then I mix about 2 teaspoons of yeast, and I get this Fleischmann's bread yeast, which I really like, and that's pretty easy to find in grocery stores here. And it gives the bread a really nice flavor, but it also rises really easily. I find it's not as susceptible to the elements in the room, like humidity, heat levels, for letting the dough rise. It really just gives it all the chance in the world to get nice and fluffy and voluminous.
Billowy.
And you taught me this trick, actually, to pre-mix the yeast in a little bit of warm water to activate it, but then I'll put a little bit of honey in the dough for flavoring. But also the sugar helps activate the yeast as well. And then you knead it together really, really well. And what I'll do is I'll do it hopefully midday when the sun's still out, or late in the afternoon. Find a nice sunny spot somewhere in the house and put the dough out in the sun to rise. And I find that's the best way. You don't even have to leave it overnight like some people do. If you get a good sunny spot or warm room, 1 hour, 2 hours, the dough will double, triple in size, and it'll be perfect. Cheers. We got to take a bite of this pizza.
Oh, we got it, my friend. Cheers. Cheers to you.
Cheers to you.
We got to tell our viewers we're going to be pizza barometers now.
Oh, the pizza barometers. And I love that you chose the Peroni. I mean, there is some sentimental value to that as well.
It does.
For you and any beer in that realm, but Peroni specifically. And I think they have some similar characteristics to Urquell in the sense that Peroni has like a little bit of distinct bitterness to it.
Yes.
And not as much as the Urquell, but that bitterness just like cuts all the flavors from the pizza so perfectly.
It so pairs well. Cheers.
So good. So I found a secret ingredient today, my friend, and I was shopping in an Italian grocery store here in Hamilton, and I found this buffalo mozzarella, this special buffalo mozzarella imported directly from Italy. It was a little bit more pricey than what I normally got, but I thought I would take a chance given the occasion of it all. And oh my, is it delicious. It is by far the best buffalo mozzarella I've ever had in my life. And that's a key. That's my secret. I use buffalo mozzarella with my Margarita pizza. And there's a reason for that. It's a little bit more tender. It's a little bit more watery, I find. And I love the way that it melts on top of the pizza. It's not rubbery like some mozzarellas are. And you tell me what you think. I find personally, it doesn't have to be buffalo mozzarella, but a fresh mozzarella is so much better than using that sort of bagged shredded mozzarella. I mean, it's all good in the end, but if you can find some nice, floating in water, fresh mozzarella, it gets all the difference in the world. And when it melts, it's the texture of the pizza that changes. What do you think? What kind of cheese do you use?
Exactly the same, my friend. Like in Italy, when you talk about mozzarella, that's the only mozzarella that people think about. Like, there are ones that you can get that are more like you're saying, like in the bag, they're a little bit more dried, but that's usually not the one that is used to make pizza. When you're coming down like to ingredients, especially in a Margarita, it's always got to be like a mozzarella di bufala, just like you said. That's the right way to go. When it comes down also to the sauce, depending on where you are, but in Naples, they tend to prefer Sammarzano tomatoes specifically because they're grown there on the Vesuvius. There's this soil that brings in all those ingredients and flavors that you can't really grow anywhere else. So like those combination of very simple flavors, like in fresh basil, just those ingredients, they just make poetry, and they just work so very well. So yeah,
really do.
I'm excited, my friend. You were able to find that delicious mozzarella. That makes the whole pizza, brings it to a different level.
Pizza poetry. It is time to close our pizza beer brackets and let everybody know at home what our second beer recommendation is.
So for the second beer, there's not many, unfortunately, Italian beers that I can access here in Florida. But I wanted to bring like a pairing that I kind of like discovered in Italy. I think works very well with Margarita or pizza in general.
I'm excited to hear about this.
That pairing is with Moretti, but not the regular Moretti, the La Rossa, which is more like a box style. So I couldn't really find something, exactly of that flavor. But then I had this realization. Why not pairing with this? Yuengling.
That's the perfect realization.
I never really realized that I've actually never tried this together like with that, but I've had them separately. But I do think that the flavors like that resemble a little bit of that style of the Moretti La Rossa, which is a little bit lighter than an actual classic Bock. So I thought, let's try it here together. I think this is the perfect setting.
That's amazing. I'm so curious to hear, like, how could Yuengling and pizza not go well together? For my closing beer bracket and my second recommendation, I am suggesting a beer that we've talked about on the channel before, that I've talked about in a past Beer Bracket of the Month episode. And I think it's the perfect accompaniment. The light body of it and the interesting flavor pair perfectly well. And that is the Saison Dupont. And I think any Saison that you can get your hands on. Now, Saison is a very sort of general term when it comes to beer. If you're curious about learning the background behind Saisons, I'll put a link down to our Legend of the Farmhouse Ale video inside the brackets down below that you can check out to learn all about that. So when you say Saison, there isn't necessarily one set beer style. I've had some Saisons that are darker. I've had some that are lighter. This one in particular is a lighter Saison. It's very easy drinking, very flavorful, very carbonated. And any beer like that will pair perfectly with this kind of pizza. I gotta pour this up because I've been without a beer for too long.
Cheers, my friend.
Look at that. And just pouring out a little bit of this Saison Dupont, like the amount of carbonation on this beer. The general message that I do want to convey with this when it comes to pairings is you don't want anything too heavy. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're thinking along the same lines as well. I mean, we're not suggesting any quads here. We're not suggesting any dark red beers. Anything with a lot of really heavy body to it or heavy flavor. You want something that's going to be crisp, clean, and refreshing with a little bit of bitterness and flavor to complement the flavors of the pizza very well.
I couldn't have said it better, my friend. Like, you don't want the beer to, especially with the Margarita that we're having here tonight. And, it's very simple flavors, very subtle. I've always liked to think about the Margarita as the lager of the pizza world, right? Because it's very simple. It's all about the simplicity. Perfect. Like you said, a quad or anything like a stout, anything like too strong in flavor will just take over all the flavors and overshadow the delicious. It'll
overshadow the flavors, but also just kind of like sit heavy in your stomach. And when you're eating something with a lot of bread and a lot, some cheese in there, like you don't want anything too heavy. The second most important part of the pizza, I think, my friend, the sauce. I think we got to get down real serious with people here and let them know, what's your process for making a sauce?
For the sauce, sorry, Wally just came here to say hi.
Hey, Wally.
For the sauce, like with the pizza, I have a slightly different approach depending on the style, of pizza that I'm making. So when it comes down to Margarita, I like to make it very simple. So I'm not using my classic like tomato sauce that I would use for pasta, but I try to find, if possible, Sammarzano tomatoes, because the Sammarzano tomatoes have a little bit more acidity, but also sweetness, and have a minerality that really complements well like all the other elements. So I start with those, I crush them, and I try just to add like very few elements. So maybe a little bit of oregano, a little bit of salt and pepper. Oh, wow. And that's it. Just to keep it like very, very, plain, and let the other ingredients like speak. How about you, my friend?
I keep it simple as well. I don't go as heavy with the seasoning as I do for my pasta sauce. So what I'll do is start off, I'll get some shallots and I'll cut those up, put them into a nicely hot pan with some oil in there, some really nice olive oil in there already. cut up a couple of cloves of garlic, throw that in with the shallots. Let that sweat out a little bit, and then I'll throw in a bottle of passata. Normally my thing is the Muti. That is the brand that I really love, that I can find really easily here. And then I'll season it with a little bit of oregano. I'll throw a bay leaf in there and a whole bunch of fresh basil. I'll just throw a bunch of fresh basil in there. For a pasta sauce, I'll put some more spices, some more seasoning in there, but I keep it a little bit more simple for the pizza sauce. And that's it. I let that simmer for about 2-3 hours on low heat, and it's perfect. It's so quick, it's so easy to do. You do not need to buy canned or bottled sauce, pre-made sauce. You do not need to do that. And believe me, it makes all the difference in the world when you're making your homemade pizza. If you take the time, do something simple and put together your own sauce, it just takes it to that next level flavor-wise and freshness-wise that you just can't beat. I'm dying to know, how's the Yuengling pairing with the pizza?
It's actually amazing. Like, I had no doubt because I could picture it. Like, and you know, that bitterness, like we said before, and the Yuengling is a little bit more pronounced, but with the cheese and the basil and the tomato sauce, it just complements each other. Absolutely recommend it. This is, you know, it's not the Mozzarella Rossa that I was trying to emulate, but it's very, very close. So highly recommend it.
What I love about the Saison Dupont and other Saisons in general, well, it's lower on the bitterness on the hops. It's much more full-bodied with the carbonation, and you get a lot more of the malt flavor, which I really love how the Urquell, the bitterness cuts the flavors like the tomato sauce and the dough and the cheese of the pizza. But the maltiness of a nice Saison like this with the high carbonation is just the perfect pairing with pizza. Well, there you go, everybody. You got 2 really good recommendations from myself and from Alessandro on easy-ish to find beers you could probably find in liquor stores around you where you are to pair along with a nice margarita pizza. Let us know down below, what pairings do you tend to do? If you're having a nice pizza at home, what kind of beer do you go with and why? Are there any other food and beer pairings you'd like us to do? Post down below as well, and we'll get to those as quickly as we can. We're going to let you go, everybody. We're going to have to go finish these pizzas. It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. Whatever you do, do not forget to close your pizza beer brackets.